Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
Fantastic, Jim. As I mentioned, this is our third segment. We're going to focus it on really bringing everything we just talked about so far together, especially when it comes to the whole aspect of communicating and presenting. And for sales professionals, they do this all the time, day in, day out. Sometimes it's one-on-one. Sometimes it's a group setting. A lot of enterprise sellers sometimes have to present to board of directors at the customer organizations. So I would really love for people to get Jim's best advice in this area. And I know within 15 minutes, it's not a lot, but let's start with, from your own experience, what you think makes a big difference for Jim when Jim is communicating, whether it's one-on-one or to a group.
Well, I've been a professional speaker for 41 years, 40 plus, and I've done 3,000 presentations around the world, and they've ranged in size from a small group of a half dozen people to big groups of 13,000 people at once. And they've been short and they've been long. Last year, I did a series of lectures in China for 1,000 people at a time, 6 hours a day, 2 days in a row, in Chengdu, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Taipei, Taiwan, oh my gosh, so I've done every kind of presentation you can imagine, including making sales presentations in a boardroom or a committee, making sales presentations in a webinar or through a online presentation to a group where I can see the group in the distance on screen, and they can just see me, the talking head. I do about 3 interviews or webinars or podcasts a week. Every week. So, I've got thousands of experiences of different types of presentations. Yes. And I've written a book on it that'll be coming out later this year or next year. It's called What to Do When You're the Speaker. Yes. And, I've got a course called Confident Communication for Public Speaking and Leading Meetings. So in other words, there's a lot of depth there.
Exactly.
And I've been the president of many organizations where I ran board meetings and such. Yes. So the principles are the same. Nobody is motivated or influenced in tandem with another person. They are influenced individually. So they're all making their own independent decisions. Now, it may be that the group has a collective assumption among them that something is good or bad or desirable or whatever. Yes. And you can build off of that. But you got to remember that across the kitchen table, mom and dad are making 2 independent decisions. They're just going to agree on it at the end, right?
Yes.
So you don't sell to mom the way you sell to dad. In the boardroom, you don't sell to the CEO the way you sell to the advisory board member who's there for the day.
Yes.
Right? So what you've got to find out in every case for a presentation is, why would they care what I've got to say?
Very good point.
I want to say that twice because that's a big deal. Yes. Why should they even care what you have to say on this subject? And when you're doing an introduction of a speaker, the classic formula is, why is this speaker speaking at this time on this topic to this group? Right?
Very good point.
So it answers that question. People ask me, do you ever get nervous before a speech? Only if I don't understand why they would care to learn about what I've got to say.
Got it, yes.
So there you go. It all comes back to, what do you want? Same thing as you on an individual basis. What do they want? What are they concerned about? What are they afraid of? What is it that's bothering them? Where's the pain? Where's the pleasure? What are they dreaming of? What do they wish, if only? The better you can do your upfront research, the better that presentation could go. Number 2, and these are just hitting major points.
Right.
Tell the blinking truth.
Yes.
In other words, when you're there talking to them, don't get an A in speech class.
Right.
Tell them the truth. If you come in there and something obvious is distracting everybody, comment on it and brush it aside for the moment and focus on the topic.
Yes.
You know, like if a room's on fire, you don't just go on presenting.
Right.
You say, hey, why don't we step outside, you know, where we can smell the smoke but not feel the heat. And I'll tell you the rest of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
By the way, on a number of occasions, I have personally had to evacuate the entire audience. One time it was 700 people.
Wow.
From two levels below the street in a convention hotel when the hotel caught on fire.
Wow.
I've had to go outdoors with a group when it was freezing cold in the snow outside, but we had to evacuate the building for some reason, usually a fire alarm.
Yes.
I've had rooms where it was 200 degrees or it felt like it, and everybody's sitting there just
dying. Yeah.
Really? We got to listen to a speaker? Come on, somebody open a window. You know, I've been in rooms where someone came. I was in a room one time presenting to a sales team, and a guy came in and said, President Reagan's been shot.
Wow. Yes. Yes.
Well, hey, that'll distract them.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And we stopped and we talked about that, and we made a decision as a group as to whether we would only go focus on that or finish talking about this.
Yes.
Because you can't just impose that on them.
Absolutely.
You know, I've spoken to a group immediately after 9/11, a few days later, in New York on Long Island.
Wow.
And wow, I mean, hey, whoa, different mindset and emotion set.
Absolutely.
I've been in a room where the room went dark, electricity went off, and we're all in pitch black.
Yes.
And this was in Kansas City. I was speaking to a group of people that sell greeting card displays for retail establishments.
Yes.
It was a greeting card company. And we're all sitting there in total darkness. And I said, would someone near the wall please open the door and leave it open so we get a little bit of light in here from outside?
Yes.
And somebody did. And I said, would someone else please check to see if this is an emergency or an inconvenience? Because if it's an emergency, we'll evacuate, and I'll lead you since I've got a mic.
Yes. Exactly.
And the mic was strangely still working, though the lights didn't.
Yeah.
And they checked, and the people stayed in the room, and I said, okay, here's your choice. We can either go out in the hallway and loiter until the lights come back on, or I can finish my point in 10 or 15 minutes in the dark.
Yes.
You'll learn the ideas, and then we're done for the day. Which do you prefer? They said, speak in the dark.
Well,
So I did, and I finished my talk.
Yeah.
So tell the truth, for heaven's sakes. In other words, be you. Don't try to be some perfect thing that's going to get your speech teacher to be impressed.
Yes.
And well, should I have notes? Well, do you need them? Yeah. Well, then have notes. Should I look at my notes or hide them and glance at them out of the corner of my eye? Well, would you trust somebody that was glancing out of the corner of their eye?
No, exactly.
No. So pick up your notes and hold them in your hand and just say, wait a minute, there's something. Oh, yeah. Let me read this to you. And then you just read them exactly what's on the page if you need to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Be real. Why? Because that's who people trust.
Yes. Very good point. And they are little things, but they can definitely make a huge difference between an experienced professional and one who's just basically still very junior.
Yeah, and people can go to my YouTube channel, Jim Cathcart, one word.
Yes.
And see all kinds of videos of speeches I've done.
Yes.
And they're all free. But one in particular, I was speaking for Toastmasters International at their 2001 meeting, and I had 1,500 people in the audience. And these are speech specialists, Toastmasters International. Yes. So they teach speaking. They are very, very conscious of what you're doing, how you're saying it, everything else, the way you stand. And so I got up on stage, happily shook the hand of the president who introduced me. And then I said, Madam Chairperson, international directors, ladies and gentlemen, I did the protocol.
Yes.
But then I said, welcome. And I just started, being me in front of them, and we laughed together and we learned together. And got a standing screaming ovation at the end of it. And at one point during the thing, I asked my son to stand up and hold up my 6-month-old grandson who was there with him.
Yes.
And he held him up, and he got a standing ovation
as well
at age 6 months.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think it's fantastic that you're sharing all of this with us, and I really love it, because the other thing that I want us to hopefully also listen from you is that you've been around trying to persuade other people for a long time. And I think for sellers, this whole idea of being able to convince, persuade, and get people to confirm the sale and commit to it, sometimes it's a far-fetched idea for some people, and they struggle with it. And specifically also when you're doing large deals where the persuasion task is distributed over a number of players, right?
Yeah. Enterprise sales, yeah.
In a very large sales. So how do you manage that? What is your own view on how people get persuaded, and then how do you then help the sellers sort of execute a plan towards that?
Well, the man who's known for the word persuasion is Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, and he's got some good books on influence and persuasion. Yeah. But when you're persuading a group, a dispersed group, in different committees and departments and things like that, what I found helpful is to identify the moving parts. In other words, which departments are going to be involved in this decision process, and who at each stage along the way makes the decision. Yes. There's one guy, there's one gal, one person in each committee or in each department who is the one that's the go or no go switch thrower, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the more you can understand that, the better off you are. When you don't have a way of knowing that, then you just have to make assumptions and test your assumptions.
Yes.
By taking the best obvious path. But I like to have a chart of some sort that I create showing all the moving parts, and then I can look at which should come first. And what is the sort of the overriding concern that brought them to the table in the first place, to even be looking at such a proposal as mine, right? And then, you got to be careful, because you have to deliver in the way you want them to receive. One of my clients makes multi-million-dollar sales in the oil and energy exploration industry.
Yes.
And years ago, they had put together a RFP, request for proposal. They'd put together a bid package. This is not it. Yes. There was a big fancy thing like this that was custom designed with their logo on the cover, and it was made out of plastic and a special textured plastic with a snap right here. And they had this beautiful, wonderful proposal inside. And they had submitted this in multiple numbers to all the various stakeholders that would be in on the decision.
The decision, yeah.
And they knew they were being considered as one of maybe a dozen that are making proposals.
Yes.
Well, I'll cut the story short. They found that they weren't getting the deals. And when they went in and said, why? They said, I don't know, you had a good proposal, and your ideas and your pricing was right. Well, then the guy said, well, let's look at your proposal. And he picked up the proposal,
yes,
but it didn't have this big, beautiful binder. Someone had taken snips and cut the binder off. Oh. And all it had was the spine with a ragged edge on it.
Yes.
And then the loose pages in a ring binder effect inside.
Of course.
And my client said, oh my God, what have you done to our beautiful package?
Yes.
He said, oh, well, we had to do that because we stacked all the proposals together, and yours was an odd size and it wouldn't fit the stack. So in order to have it in the stack, we had to snip off that beautiful exterior.
Yes.
Well, no wonder he lost. It looks like a piece of trash.
Wow. Yes.
So, tens of thousands of dollars spent to do the right thing ended up being the wrong thing, because that's not how they process it.
Yes.
Years ago, I was trying to get all the speakers bureaus in the country to have a better file on me.
Yes.
So I found out what their files looked like by visiting a lot of speakers bureaus.
Yes.
And then I designed a Jim Cathcart file that was complete and didn't need them to create a file. They could just drop it in, and it would fit right with the others.
a consistent template and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And today that same file would be called my website.
Yes.
But
Exactly.
this was in the 1990s when nobody had a website.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you're actually making the point about something that's a whole lot more critical, which is understand how persuasion or decisions are made by the client, typically how they like to be sold as much as possible, and then use this knowledge to then help you look at the stakeholders, where the decision makers are, and then be able to really develop that campaign that will help you at the very end to get that.
And it may be that you need to influence a number of people who influence other people who make the ultimate decision, but it's really helpful to ask multiple times of multiple stakeholders, how are decisions like this typically made in this organization?
Exactly. Unpacking the decision-making process.
Yeah.
And let's kind of cap it off, Jim, with when you talked about some physical things happening in the environment where you were speaking, but I'd love to also see if you are, let's say, in a boardroom, you're trying to make that sale, and then you get a curveball at you from one of the board members.
Yeah.
You've seen some of those examples.
Boy.
If you can share with us some of those.
Well, I always stop and ask myself, what's under what was just said?
Yes.
So someone says, Jim, this is obviously not going to work because blank, and let's say blank is untrue, whatever it is that they just said. And I say, well, Ash, if that were true, you'd be right. But the reason that comes up is this, and that's why the point you just made won't matter or apply in this situation. And then I'd go on and make my case. So in other words, don't handle objections, address concerns. You say it's just a play on words. No, it's not. If someone objects to buying from you, you're already adversaries.
Right.
Your Honor, I object. We should not buy from this person, right? You don't address them while they're still concerns. And if you know, and you usually do, what the concerns typically are.
Right, exactly.
You might say, ladies and gentlemen, the primary concerns with something like this are, one, is this technology reliable? I mean, is it really proven? Can it last? Will it stand up under tough circumstances and changes?
Exactly, yeah.
And then you put that down, and you're going to address that. Another is this a reasonable price? I mean, does it make sense to commit this kind of dollars to something like this? We're certainly going to explore that because that's a vital feature. Another is, are we the kind of people you can depend on to be there even when the weather turns bad on this?
Yes.
So I'm going to address that too. What additional concerns do you have that I might need to address today in this presentation?
Yeah, very bravely addressing those from on the front end and then asking for additional things. Yeah.
Or they say, well, what about, we've been with XYZ for 20 years now.
Yes.
If we change over, we're going to lose efficiency and it's going to cost us money and so on and so forth. Thank you for that. Absolutely. The conversion process needs to be seamless, and I'll address that.
Absolutely. Wonderful, Jim.
Yeah.
I am actually going to request of you to help us close this out by taking us back to the whole concept that you talked several times about, which is the whole idea of, what do you want your legacy to be, the future you want to build. You told a very good story in one of your talks about this gentleman that basically took, from one individual working at a dealership to becoming an owner of several dealerships himself, the gentleman that drove the car with you one time. But maybe, just explain to people that concept and how it can actually help people when times are hard to remember where they're going.
You bet. There's a daily question that I propose that people should keep in front of them, and that is, how would the person I'd like to become do the things I'm about to do? In other words, if I'm going to a meeting today, I don't need to go into that meeting, or I shouldn't go into that meeting thinking like I used to be.
Yes.
I ought to think about, okay, if I want to be the international sales leader, if I want to be the most respected or one of the most respected professionals in my field in this, how would that person me, not someone else, but me at that level, do this maybe a little differently than I'm going to do it today.
Yes.
And then it'll cause you to be a little bit more prepared, a little bit more mature, a little bit more, this ain't my first rodeo. In other words, I've dealt with this before and I can handle it, so you're not deer in the headlights when a surprising question comes up. A little bit more confident, a little bit more poised, but that's the whole point. How would the person you'd like to be, the better you, the more advanced, the more sophisticated you, how would that version of you do what you're about to do today? And with that daily question, you can transform your life.
Yeah, I loved when I heard that the first time, and I'm glad that we brought it up.
Thank you.
And it's fantastic. I'm glad we closed our conversation on it. Jim, it's been an amazing pleasure. I think the Top 1% Sellers Academy is going to be a better place, a better source of amazing content for sellers because you've joined us. I'm very grateful for you being here. I will definitely share with our audience all the different resources you mentioned and even more, because I think that it's just an amazing resource you have on your website as well as your books and your videos. I'm very glad that you're able to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here, and I appreciate the privilege.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you very much for attending. We'll definitely be posting a lot of this content across a number of sites, the Top 1% Sellers Academy, which is launching in a few weeks, as well as also LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. So definitely please share. As you heard Jim talk, it's really more about sharing a lot of that positivity, which will bring a lot of goodness into your own sales career and in your life as well. Jim, thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.